Hi for all the folks watching the recording, and for my friend that I already know, B, and for my new friend, Prince. Lovely to meet you all. My name is Ben Green. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a transgender man, a public speaker, an advocate, and above all, I'm someone who's hopeful. I'm someone who's joyful. A lot of time in my life I've spent with people expecting me to be miserable, expecting me to be this sad trans caricature. And that's not who I want to be, and that's not who I am. So many people try to flatten our stories, try to make us into this one thing, whether it's people who hate us or people who love us, who want to support us because they think we're just so sad. And I have no patience for that. I am one of the most joyful people that I know, and it's not just because I'm living somewhere comfortable or where things were easy. I spent 5 years as an organizer in Missouri from 2020 until earlier this year when we moved because of my wife's job. And I'm one of the most joyful people I know because I wake up and that's a choice that I make every single day. And I make that choice not just for myself, not just for the people around me, but I make that choice holding the power of the trans organizers that came before me and that have built a movement that is profoundly joyful. And so I'm excited to be honoring their legacies by talking a whole lot about joy in the fight for queer rights and civil rights throughout history. Um, so let me pull up my slides here and we can get a little more joyful. Um, there are so many ways that joy has been used as an engine of change in so many of our movements. And I know for some people, joy brings up this almost like almost angry reaction. For some people, they lean really far into it. They say, my joy is resistance. And what they kind of mean is, I want to go to brunch and I don't want to be asked to do something difficult. Other people go way far in the other direction and say the time is for anger. The time is for gloom and doom and recognizing that the world is ending. And everyone who's talking about joy is wasting their time. But the reality is we have to find a spot in the middle. So I have a quote that I really love from an author named Dan Savage that you may have seen before, where he said, during the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win then, and we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to win now, but we could. Keep fighting and keep dancing. And I hold this quote really close to my heart. I think there's a lot of me that feels like the way we do movements now, we certainly do the mourning and the grieving, right? We have plenty of losses that we spend time sitting in really deeply and holding what those losses mean and what they could mean. We certainly do the fighting. We are out in the streets. We are angry. We are pushing back. We are finding ways to organize. But then at the end of that long day, we don't come together and dance or party or celebrate. We say it's not time for celebrating. And we go home to our own couches and we sit and we scroll by ourselves. And then we wonder, why am I so tired? Why am I so angry? It's not yet time to celebrate, but that makes us feel awful. So that joy, the dance keeps us in the fight. It gives us the energy we need to keep moving forward. So the thesis of the presentation that I have basically is that joy shows up in our movements in three ways: joyful imagination, joyful invitation, and joyful continuation. Joy gives us the ability to dream of something better, to ask, where are we going? What are we actually trying to build? The ability to invite as many other people as possible into this movement with us, to look at what we're doing and say, I want a piece of that. I want to get free too. I want a part of what they're fighting for. I'll fight with you. And we want to use joy to make sure that we make it to that world. I believe in liberation in our lifetimes. It may not be complete, it might be messy, it will be human, there will always be further to go. But I believe genuinely we will see marked gains for the trans and queer community in our lifetimes. And I want you to live long enough to get there. And joy is one of the most amazing ways to make sure that we can get to that point. I want to build movements that work and movements that last. So I'm going to start by talking about making the case for joy right now. And then we'll talk about how and where that shows up and where that's shown up through the fight for queer rights and civil rights in history. So I think it's important that we start by setting some foundations and talking about some definitions because I talk about joy a lot. That's the biggest buzzword right now. Everybody's talking about joy. But what does that actually mean? Joy is a notably distinct concept from happiness. Happiness is an emotion. It is a feeling based on circumstances. When something is really good, you're eating an ice cream cone, or things are happy, you go for a nice walk. That's not what we're here to talk about. Joy is an attitude that defies circumstances. Deeper satisfaction, contentment, community connection, impact, positive mindset. I'll give you an example. I spend a lot of time testifying at the Missouri State Capitol, and I'm not happy to be there. It's terrible. I'm exhausted. I'm frustrated. I don't feel listened to, but I am joyful. I'm joyful because I choose to carpool instead of driving by myself because I know I would sit alone and stew. I'm joyful because I go and I sit in the overflow room and we heckle the live stream of the legislators. I'm joyful because I bring my tarot cards and I do readings for all the kids that come so that they can have some space to debrief their energy and to calm down a bit after they give their testimony. I'm joyful because I choose to be so, even when I am not happy. So that joy is what we're here to talk about today. Our ability to say, I will choose to be joyful, even when others are not choosing that for me. So why do we make that choice? What is the true power of joy? Joy, in short, is asking where we're going, what we're building, and not letting our opposition write our stories. I have things I dream about because, to be quite frank with you all, Donald Trump is not creative enough for me to copy off his homework. What I'm dreaming of is far bigger than the opposite of whatever that guy's doing. I'm dreaming of a future that is warm, that is gentle, that is kind, where my needs are met, where my community surrounds me, and I'm able to surround them in turn with love. I'm dreaming really specifically of what safety looks like, of what mutual aid feels like, of how those systems operate. And when I get excited about those, that joy keeps me going. It makes sure that we stay energized towards having a thing to fight for. And there are so many colors on the joy palette, if we want to use a little artist's metaphor, right? Joy comes from togetherness, empowerment, movement, self-intimacy, knowing yourself beautifully, whimsy and play, slowing down and speeding up and running around and eating good food and making art and connecting to some higher power that makes you feel a part of something. It's amazing how many things create our joy. So I think that's a really critical thing that we bring into our movements. And now I want to start to talk about those movements themselves. How has joy showed up throughout the history of the queer rights movement? So we'll start with that first principle, joyful imagination, which is that idea that joy helps us dream of something specifically better. And so it would be impossible for me to talk about dreaming and imagination without talking about two of the greatest imaginative minds of our lifetimes and the generations before and the generations after and kind of all people, which is the authors Ursula Le Guin and Octavia Butler. These were two pioneering female science fiction authors who wrote books that defied so much of what people thought literature could do at the time. And they were making it easy for people to explore what something better could look like. Ursula Le Guin is known for writing messy science fiction futures that talked about gender in strange ways, that talked about dreaming of a better future, that talked about the messy ways the revolution showed up. And she, in her book The Dispossessed, said, "You cannot buy the revolution. You cannot make the revolution. You can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit or it is nowhere." And her books really were so amazing at radicalizing people, at showing them there's something more that we can fight for. Octavia Butler is often called the mother of Afrofuturism. In her writing, she explored themes of power, identity, and really specifically focused on depicting egalitarian futures that were unimpeded by racism. She's quoted as saying, "I never bought into my invisibility or non-existence as a Black person. As a female and as an African American, I wrote myself into the world. I wrote myself into the present, the future, and the past." These two authors and the thousands of authors and artists and songwriters and poets and organizers who were inspired by them have been using joy to dream of something radically different, not just radically opposite from what we have now, but getting really specific about what's that going to look like. And this inspired people in real life. So the next slide I'm going to show you is really, really dense, but I actually love this slide. What this is a collection of the 65 community survival programs of the Black Panther Party from 1967 until 1982. So I know for me, when I was in school, I went to a very, very white high school in Connecticut, which meant that when we learned about the civil rights movement, pretty much what we learned is MLK good, Black Panthers bad, because they were more angry and violent and militant. And that was all that we learned about the Black Panthers. It wasn't until I was a college student and realized that I could teach myself things about different topics that I realized how radical of dreaming the Black Panther Party was doing. I look at this list, and these weren't a list of like goals or dreams, ideals. This was their actual programs that they were hosting regularly for the people in their community. And I am overwhelmed by the love and the dreams I can feel they poured into creating these programs, taking care of disabled and incarcerated folks, free furniture, teen programs, health literacy programs. And some of these programs were focused on how can I help my community survive right here and now, right? Thinking about their free breakfast program, thinking about their free furniture program, pest control programs, senior safety programs. Those were about immediate survival. But also looking on here, seeing things about outreach and preventative care, nutrition classes, higher education opportunities, employment programs, liberation schools that talked about how we build a better future and created a space for dialogue, debate, and brainstorming, incubating those brilliant next minds of leadership. These were investments into building something beautiful, into building something far bigger than where they had started. And heavily inspired by the work of the Black Panther Party, Marsha P. Johnson created the STAR, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, which had a similarly massive list of programs that she put together almost exclusively by herself, sometimes with Sylvia Rivera, although she didn't come onto the scene until later, which focused on providing housing, drug use prevention, rehabilitation, as well as mutual aid programs and community dances and parties and bake sales to help with bail funds. There were so many ways that people throughout our movements have spent time sitting and saying, what do I want? What am I dreaming of? Not just how am I surviving right now, but where could we go? What could we build? And so I want us to carry this with us today and ask ourselves the simple question of what do you want? What does that world feel like? What is it like to live there? And I want you to get really specific. I want you to let go of the idea that it needs to be completely selfish or this is what I should want, completely selfless. We want to dream of something and it's okay for it to be personal. And we want to avoid using words like not or no or dreaming of what we want to build. And when we hold that dream close and tight in our hearts, that gives us something to walk towards. And that will always be more sustaining than pure anger. Anger is a sword that you hold by the blade. It can only carry us so far. So, as you're thinking about your answer to this question, I'll share my future dream of what the world I want to live in is. And I really specifically take time to envision myself living in this world because it gives me more of an investment in that. I can see myself getting to a better future, which encourages me to keep going and to take care of myself and not just try to burn out and martyr myself so someone else can have a good world. I deserve to live in a world that is better. We all do. So the world I want to build is a safe one. I dream of a world where my wife and I can take a road trip from where we live now in Southern California to Disney World in Florida. I want us to be able to drive the whole way. I don't want to have to rule out any states to say, well, I can't go there. I couldn't possibly use the restroom there. I want us to drive across the country. And whenever we feel like it, I want us to pull off the highway and drive around a small town, visit a queer community center, stop by a local bar and maybe meet a cool advocate or two, or just share casually that I work in writing books about trans people and trans fantasy stories. And we talk openly about our journeys. I meet the queer and trans people who live in those small towns. We have a great conversation. We all feel safe. And then I keep driving and I keep exploring. That's the world that I want to live in. It is gentle. It does not require people to move to certain states or certain cities to feel safe where they are. I love small town queer pride as a small town person. So that's what I'm dreaming of, which means that I spend a lot of time working in small towns. My advocacy focuses on the world that I want to build, which means that I spend a lot of time with grandparents groups and churches and synagogues and these folks in small towns who are trying to make their communities into places worth living and worth staying. I'm thinking often about how I align my actions and relationships to reflect that world that I'm dreaming of. If I want a world that's gentler, a world where people can ask a question and make a mistake and we can all laugh it off and then move on together. I have to start acting like that now because no one's going to build that world for me that I can step into that. So I'm curious if anyone wants to share in the chat or out loud, what are you dreaming of? What do you hold in your heart as the world that you want to build? And trying to avoid using words like not or no, not what are you running away from? What do you want? What are you walking towards? Feel free to share out loud or in the chat if that's something you're comfortable with. All right. I don't want to pressure anybody, and I know that it is getting very late, so I'm going to continue on in case no one is in the mood to be chatty today. Oh, I see. I've got something in the chat. I want to be able to go down south and visit my family in an HBCU. Hell yeah. I want that for you too. And so, as we hold on to these dreams, as we think about what we want, we can start asking, what's one thing I can do today that might make that more likely? And maybe the answer is, I need to learn a little bit more. I don't know how to fix that area. I don't know how to fix the South. I don't know what HBCUs need to be more inclusive. But who does? So I'm sure that I'm not the first person to care about this. So maybe we need to learn more. Maybe we know what needs to happen and we're just waiting for the right time or the right person to take that first step. But it's always important to remember there's no such thing as the right person at the right time. There's only you now. Ah, last meeting is wrapping up. Okay, I was wondering where all the folks were. That's great. Thanks, Jenny. We were just talking about future dreaming, which is asking ourselves the question of what's the world you want to build and how does it feel to live there? We're talking all about the role of joy in the movements around us and how change gets made. So, our part one was that we use joy to get excited about the future we're trying to build versus building a movement that is exclusively focused on what do I not want? What am I angry about? What am I running away from? Because that can only carry us so far. So, the next section of this presentation, the next power of joy in our movements in history and today, is joyful invitation. Our community isn't always getting the best reputation for being welcoming. When I first got into public speaking work about 5 years ago, I was ready for hecklers, I was ready for hate, I was ready for anger. I made a whole spreadsheet of all the shitty things I thought people would say to me when I was giving a presentation and how I'd respond. And then no one said any of those things. Instead, they started almost all of their questions with an apology. I'm sorry if I can't ask this. I'm sorry if this is too simple. I'm sorry if this is too personal. I'm sorry if this is the wrong question. And I realized how much fear there was from so many potential allies that they're going to engage the wrong way. Fear that is so massive that they don't bother starting. They don't bother walking into the room and trying because they feel like once they get it wrong, it's over. Sometimes we think that if we're angry enough at people, if we yell at them for long enough, if we make them feel bad enough, or put them through enough ideological purity tests, they'll be excited to join our party. And the result is mostly a movement that burns out its brilliant leaders left and right. I know so many people who have been driven out of the movement because they're just exhausted by how much time we spend hoping that we can be angry enough to get people to care. But throughout time, joy has been an amazing way that the queer rights movement has brought more people into the party. And so let's talk about some of those moments in history. Okay, our waiting room is blowing up. Glad to see that everyone is now coming over from the earlier session. I'm just going to wait a moment and let everybody join and then catch them all up. Yeah, Jenny, cancel culture has teeth. I always like to say that cancel culture, as the right imagines it, absolutely does not exist. They all can say whatever they want with no accountability. But cancel culture within the left, oh man, we're vicious. We're eating each other alive out here. And that's brutal, and that's not actually getting us any closer to freedom. Um, okay, for all of those of you who were here with me from the start, bear with me while I do a really speedy recap for all of the wonderful people who are just joining us. To everybody who is jumping on from the last session, hi, great to see you all. Thanks for being here. I'm Ben Green, use he, him pronouns. I'm a community organizer, a trans man, an author, and I'm someone who focuses a lot on joy. I focus on joy in the book I wrote for parents of trans kids called My Child is Trans Now What? I focus on joy in my Substack Good Queer News. I focus on joy in the work that I do, activating new allies and parents through PFLAG, teaching them how to get involved in their local communities. And so I'm really excited to be talking about joy with you all in this session today. Really quick recap of what we've gone over so far. First is the difference between joy and happiness, because they are very different. When people say joy is resistance, sometimes they're talking just about happiness. They're simply saying, leave me alone, I want to go to brunch, and that will be enough to fix the mess that we're in. Happiness is an emotion. It's a feeling based on circumstances, often based on being able to forget the challenges around you. And that's great. I love to be happy. Things like eating an ice cream cone, listening to your favorite album, going for a walk with a dear friend, these make me happy. Joy is an attitude that defies circumstances. Community connection, impact, satisfaction, contentment, mindset. So, as an example of what I mean by that, when I go to testify at the Missouri State Capitol, I'm not happy. I don't like it there, and they don't like me there either. They're disrespectful. It is hostile. I am tired. I usually have to wake up at 4 a.m. to get there for the hearings on time. I'm not happy to be there, but I'm joyful because I choose to be so. I choose to carpool instead of driving by myself and sitting for hours isolated and stewing and angry in the car. I'm joyful because we order 65 pizzas to our favorite legislator's office and hang around shooting the shit and laughing and making fun of how ugly the Republicans' hairstyles are before we start driving home. I'm joyful because I bring my tarot cards and I do readings for the kids after they give their testimonies and want to spend a moment dreaming about the future and not thinking about the horrible question they just got asked. Even when we are not happy, we can choose to be joyful, and no one else can make that choice for us. So when I say my joy is resistance, this is what I'm talking about, not my happiness. I like to be happy, but I'm not always going to be happy. It's a hard time. But I can choose to be joyful every day. So the first layer of joy we talked about was joyful imagination, our ability to dream of a better future. Our ability to ask not just what am I running away from, what am I angry about, but also what am I excited about? What am I passionate about? What is the world I want to build? When I started working with parents of trans kids in 2021, I found that so often they were motivated by fear alone. They would show up to PFLAG meetings or they would call me and say, I need help. I don't want my kid to kill themselves. Suicide statistics were the beginning and end of the whole conversation around why it matters to support trans kids. And that's why I started focusing on joy, was saying, hey, you should support your kid, not just because we don't want them to be suicidal or anxious or depressed, which, to be clear, we don't. But that's not the entire reason we should support them. We should support our trans kids because they can have beautiful, robust lives as trans adults, because they can become trans spouses, trans CEOs, trans parents, because they can become adults who are happy. Even if their lives aren't spectacular celebrity lives, they can be good people who are happy, who are loved, who are joyful because they choose to be so, because you choose to love them. And that joy is so much more motivating than just saying, what are we afraid of today? So the second layer of joy that we were about to jump into is joyful invitation. Essentially saying that right now, the way that we're trying to get more people on our side to support our community, to join our movement, and to get involved on the front lines, the methods we have right now are not working. Yelling at people, making them feel guilty, making them feel embarrassed, and hoping that that will do enough to make them decide to throw themselves all in for queer rights isn't actually working. We say things like Google is free. Baby girl, Google is broken. Google has not worked for a very long time. Google is mostly a list of sponsored advertisements for conversion therapy. That's not actually helpful. How can we use joy? And how has the queer community used joy in the past to bring people along with us? So I want to start by thinking about a place that most people don't associate with queer joy, which is Weimar Berlin, which was the period in Berlin directly preceding Hitler's rise to power. In the period before the Nazi regime, for decades, there was a thriving queer nightlife scene with transness, queerness, polyamory, so many beautiful things. And one of the most popular tourist attractions was called the El Dorado Club. So here's a picture of the El Dorado Club in 1932. Their motto in German, translated to English, says, "Here it's right." In this space, anyone could love who they wanted. They could dance with whoever they needed. And this club wasn't just held in secret. The El Dorado Club was listed as a global tourist destination. People would travel from around the world at a time where international travel was not easy to do because they wanted to see the beauty that people were bringing to the El Dorado Club. And they would come and often realize something about themselves. It was an amazing space, both for queer folks to see themselves for the first time, to realize what was possible, and for allies to meet and mingle with LGBTQ people. While they were in Berlin, they would then often go to a public tour of the Institute for Sexual Science. Some people have heard about Magnus Hirschfeld. He was running decades before anybody thought queer people were doing that. He was running a massive trans healthcare organization. He did housing, he did gender affirming surgeries, he did hormone therapy, he did research, and he did public education. Regularly, Dr. Hirschfeld invited members of the community, members of parliament, governments of other countries all around the world to visit the Institute for Sexual Science and meet the transgender people who were living and working there, not parading them around like circus animals, but giving them the opportunity to say, hey, I'm just a normal person. Ask me questions, learn about my story. Isn't it cool what humans can do? Isn't it cool how we can grow? And Dr. Hirschfeld toured around the world. Even after the Institute for Sexual Science was ultimately burned by the Nazi regime, he continued to travel around the world, lecturing about the amazing work that he did at the Institute, changing public opinion because we built these spaces where we had our joy and we invited people in to celebrate with us, to sit with us, and to learn with us, which I think is so beautiful. Um, there's also an amazing story here in the US of PFLAG. So Jean Manford marched with her son Morty Manford after he was a gay rights activist. He was beaten by the police, and so she came a week later because she was so furious. She came to march in the Christopher Street Liberation Day parade in 1972, carrying a sign that said, "Parents of gays unite in support for their children." She marched, and at that time, nobody was marching with a sign like that. The Christopher Street Liberation Day parade was for the gays and the transsexuals and the lesbians and pretty much nobody else. But Jean Manford was there. And she is often attributed as saying she is the mother of the LGBTQ ally movement. She is the mom who made it okay to love your LGBTQ kid. In her church basement, she started PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. She and her husband regularly talked to their friends, talked to national TV to say, if you love your kid, you should love your gay kid. You should love your lesbian kid, your queer kid, your trans kid. And she told parents, it's not a bad thing to love your queer kid. Through the passionate, fiery joy, the love that she had for her son Morty, Jean Manford built an organization that over time grew to over 200,000 members. And PFLAG to this day is an organization that's motto is leading with love. Parents walk in often in a state of panic and fear and isolation, and the PFLAG leaders start by saying, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. They connect with that joy, with the understanding that so much love we have for our kids, even if we're not sure how to act quite right about it. We use joy to invite people in. Another example of this, where I lived for a while in St. Louis, was the Festival of Nations. It was an annual gathering for free that gathered over 100,000 people every weekend that they hosted it in one of the most popular parks in the city, that brought everybody together to enjoy food and dancing and poetry and cultural celebrations of the hundreds of different countries and cultures that combined to make St. Louis a really rich, diverse tapestry and landscape, which I absolutely love. It's so amazing that this festival is built on joy, built on that togetherness, on that moment of saying, I want to share my culture with you. And people are so excited to come and learn about each other, to meet their neighbors in a brand new way, and then to learn, how can I show up for you? What is your community struggling with right now? What does it look like for me to walk by your side towards liberation? But they start with that joyful invitation. So, how can we do that in our own movement? How can we use joy to invite people? Yeah, somebody mentioned that they're in the Santa Clarita chapter of PFLAG, and it's wonderful. As trans people, I have to say, being in a PFLAG chapter is underrated, because you know what a PFLAG chapter is? It's a big group of phenomenal empty nester parents who want to love you so bad. If you need a hug, if you need a stand-in parent, if you need a place to go for Thanksgiving, if you need somebody to make you a lasagna, go to a PFLAG meeting. They want to love you. It's amazing to find those communities. Highly recommend joining PFLAG as a trans person. I love PFLAG. So how can we bring joyful invitation into our movements today? There's this philosophy that I have that I essentially call the allyship house. When I came out as trans, I announced to everyone around me that I was throwing a party at my house and I wanted them there. And this party was called Allyship. Some people already knew the party was happening. They were inside setting up the decorations before I was. The closet was glass. It wasn't that hard to figure out, but they were there first. That was awesome. Other people had no idea the party was coming. They didn't know trans was a thing, but they wanted to love me. They showed up right on time, ready to help. Other people were late, and we noticed. Some members of my family took 8 years to call me Ben for the first time, and that was hard. So if I'm throwing my party and I notice that Uncle Steve has not shown up, and I call him up and say, God, of course you're late to my party, you effing bigot. You're lost. I know you're lost. Just turn left. And I hang up the phone. That's going to do two things. Number one, why on earth does he want to come to my party if he knows that whatever time he arrives, he's late? It will be too late forever, and everyone will notice that it took him too long. That doesn't feel like a party worth attending. And the other thing it does is, by me saying just turn left, that's like the worst navigational advice of all time. Where's Uncle Steve? I don't know what direction he's facing. I don't know whether he's left the house or not. I can't give you directions unless I know where you are. Bringing joy into this. When allyship is a party of togetherness, when we all are welcome, someone knows that no matter when they arrive, we are glad to see them. They feel safe arriving to the party imperfectly. And then we build a party that people actually want to show up with. To lead with joy is to see the person sitting across from you and say, I'm glad you're here. So, what does that actually mean? How do we do that in practice? The first thing to do is to focus on asking questions and being curious. I think of myself as an anthropologist when I'm in these difficult conversations, right? If somebody's saying, I don't want to use they, them pronouns, a lot of my job is spent sitting down with people that everyone else has written off, has said it's no point talking to them. They are a lost cause. And then that's when I get called in. And so I sit and I ask them questions. I want to understand, for lack of a better term, or maybe it's perfect, why are you like this? Who hurt you? I ask a lot of questions. Tell me more about this. When did you first learn about this community? Help me understand what this means to you. Why is this such a big deal? What do you view as the worst case scenario here? I focus on asking questions and being curious. And you can validate feelings without validating behaviors. I don't have to say, you're right, these trans people are just so confusing. But I can say, it sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed by how fast language is changing around you, right? That little difference lets somebody know that I see them. I'm not telling them they're right to treat people in the way that they are, but I'm acknowledging the experience that they're having. They're overwhelmed. In the world that we're in, people are set up to fail. They don't have access to that education. They don't know where to go to start that learning. And trans stories are often hidden from them actively in our history classes, in our classrooms, on our TV shows, and the news. These stories are being hidden by forces much greater than just your neighbor or your Uncle Joe, right? They're often not deciding to not learn about trans people. People have decided not to teach them. So we also want to not forget to honor the courage it takes for someone to change their entire worldview. It's going to take a minute for someone to truly reconceptualize what gender is, right? For so many of us who've spent a long time in the trans community or the queer community, it can be easy to feel like this is really natural because it is. I think it's beautiful. I think it makes so much more sense. And it's easy to forget that for some people, gender is the gravity that holds their world together. Gender is everything. That pure binary says here's how you dress, here's what you do, here's how you act and who you are and how you interact with others. Gender is everything. It's going to take a minute to be able to say, what if that entire foundation is wrong? That's terrifying. Giving people a minute while they work through that is okay. We also want to recognize that we don't want to let perfect be the enemy of progress. Even if yesterday was the best day, the second best day is today. I am always glad when someone new comes in. And when we're inviting people to get more involved in our movements, right? Maybe somebody is a really supportive friend, but they're never getting involved in a protest or in coming with you to the Capitol. We want to make sure we invite people to be a part of moments of the movement that are joyful. Not everything we do is going to be joyful, but we can also say, we're having a community celebration. Do you want to come? I'm going to repaint a fence in the Transgender Memorial Garden so that we can build a beautiful space. I want to build this inclusive community. We can use joy to show people, hey, it feels good to be a part of this movement. Now, one other really quick thing I want to say about joyful invitation is that what I do not intend to do here is respectability politics, is to say, well, just don't be angry at everybody. Why can't we all just be patient and nice all the time, no matter what people say to us? That is not what I am here to say. What I am here to say is that there are different emotions that are all a part of the rich tapestry of human experience. There is no good emotion, there is no bad emotion. All of our emotions are beautiful. Emotions like anger, like exhaustion, like grief. These are critical, beautiful emotions that help us understand when something cannot be accepted, when a boundary has been crossed, when something needs to change, or something has been lost and changed in a way that cannot come back. These emotions are powerful. They are so important. And that you cannot build a home in anger. We can recognize anger as an emotional experience without hoping to label that as a teaching tool. So if you look at this list and say, okay, I want to sit with someone and ask them questions, but right now I'm feeling too angry, that means that right now an invitation to the party isn't our priority. If you can't tap into this patience, into this joy right now, that means you have some other needs that aren't met. Whether you aren't feeling safe in this interaction, you aren't feeling respected by this individual, or you are just plain old out of energy. That's okay. Being able to recognize that not every emotional state is the right one to be in order to get somebody to come to the party is critical. So that if somebody starts asking us a question, we can say, I'm not the right person for this question right now. Here is a resource you should look at. Here is my favorite book. Here is a person you should go and talk to, right? We can pass somebody along on the water slide towards coming to our party. We don't need to be friction. We don't need to yell at them for asking, but you don't have to hold their hand the whole time either. Being able to listen to ourselves is also tremendously joyful, so that when we are then fully energized and healed, then we can be a part of these conversations. So, the final aspect of joy as an engine for change in the queer and civil rights movements around us is joyful continuation, using joy to help us keep going. In one of his memories of the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel watched a fellow prisoner trade his daily ration of bread for simple materials to put together a menorah. excuse me, which is a something you could build in the Jewish community in order to celebrate the holiday of Hanukkah. And he wrote that he couldn't believe the sacrifices this man was making to observe the holiday. He was trading his only food he'd get for the day. And so a stunned Ellie asked him, Hanukkah in Auschwitz? And the man replied, especially in Auschwitz. Even in the moments that feel the darkest, our joy is the most important. Joy is not reserved for the victory. Joy is not only for the finish line or for the privileged few. Joy is for right now. Joy is for all of us. Joy is always important. And the more it feels like we can't bother with joy right now, the more we need to push back and say, no, I extra need joy right now. So, what are the different ways we can use joy to take care of each other and to take care of ourselves? And how has that showed up in the movement around us? Food is one of the most beautiful examples of love and joy and community care. There is a reason one of the most well-known expressions for building relationships is to break bread with someone. Food is a labor of love, a way to connect to our heritage and ancestry, and to provide meaningful nourishment to other people. So this story is one of the lesser known stories from the civil rights movement, and the story of Georgia Gilmore, the founder of the Club from Nowhere. She made baked goods and boxed lunches to sell around the city to fund transportation needs during the Montgomery bus boycotts, right? Because when all of these people were not riding the buses, they still needed to get to the work. They still needed to get to church, to the grocery store, to their doctor's appointments. And so that was significantly more expensive. And people would also often ask them, where do you get the money to afford this? How can you keep this protest going? But she called her club, she called her group the Club from Nowhere because people would get asked that and they'd say, I got it from nowhere. And what that meant is I got it from Georgia Gilmore and her food. Once she was fired from her full-time job as a chef for her activism, Martin Luther King Jr. suggested she turn her home into a restaurant, and so she did. She was regularly cooking food in bulk to bring to meetings of leaders, and whenever a VIP came in from out of town, they were hosted at her house. So she would cook a massive meal for them, and then she would come and sit and break bread with them and make sure that Black women always had a voice at the table and they would share food and exchange their ideas. Another amazing way that we use joy around us is through music. Music helps us heal, helps us push each other. It's amazing. There is an album here called Sit-In Songs, Songs of the Freedom Riders, which was released in 1962. It was a collection of the songs used in peaceful protests to connect with onlookers and build community power, right? Because the power of a sit-in is that they would just come and sit at counters on diners in the civil rights movements, and then the police would often come in and brutalize them. And so many people, it was very public, would gather around and see what was happening. And the Freedom Riders would plan in advance. Here's the songs we're going to sing today. Songs like We Shall Overcome. And they would sit and they would take the pain that came their way and they would do nothing but sing. And when the onlookers watched, they would understand what was happening. They would be moved in a very different way and say, I think I need to do something about this. I think I need to care. There are also artists like David Bowie, profoundly gender-bending artists who are clearly transgressing the normal bounds of gender and sexuality, but people didn't care because the music was good. If David Bowie tried to have a career like Tony Robbins as a motivational speaker, he probably wouldn't have gone very far. If he just said, I want to talk about fashion, I want to talk about queerness and sexuality, people probably would not have listened to him nearly half as much, nearly a tenth as much. But he was an incredible artist. And so he used beautiful music and flamboyant outfits and transgressive ways of being to carry the message far further than the speech alone. When I taught my dad about non-binary people for the first time and explained to him the different ways they presented themselves and showed up, he didn't say that's weird. He said, oh, kind of like David Bowie. That connection meant something to him. It helped push the culture far more than just talking about it ever could. So, some reminders for how we carry this into our lives today. How do we use joy to heal? We take actual breaks and we trust each other to carry the torch.
Sometimes when a choir is performing, they hold a note for over a minute, and the average person could not possibly sing a note for an entire minute. So, how does a choir hold that note? They take turns. They trust the other singers. They pause, they take a breath, and then when they're ready, they pick up the note. We can hold the note if we do it together. You don't have to sing the entire time, and in fact, we can also choose joy by setting strict personal policies and goals around when and how we choose to engage with the news and social media. Hear me when I say, and this is, I think, the most important thing I'm going to say to you all day. Your despair is someone else's business model. I understand what news and social media used to be. That is not what they are anymore. They are businesses, and your despair is their business model. Well-adjusted people don't spend 8 hours a day doom scrolling. People who are feeling safe don't read 100 different articles about the same thing and then go through all the comments fighting with people who seem like they're looking for a fight in there. The angrier we are, the more advertising revenue they're able to make off of us. So it's not a coincidence that we open our phones and feel like the world is falling apart. It's not because all the news is bad, it's because bad news is the most profitable to show you. It keeps us numb, it keeps us afraid, it keeps us disconnected. Choosing joy means choosing intentionality about how we engage with the news. We also want to redefine what victory is going to look like and celebrate every win as they come, even if they are messy, even if they are temporary, even if they are incomplete. As I started spending more time talking about good news, talking about hope, I found something interesting. Sometimes there would be a really bad thing and a really good thing that happened in the same week, and I would talk about them both. And if I ever talked about just one, people would have very interesting reactions. If I talked about the good news, people would often reach out to me directly to say, how could you talk about good news at a time like this? Don't you know this horrible thing is happening? Interestingly, I never got the same kinds of messages in the inverse. If I posted about something bad that was happening, people wouldn't say, how could you be sad? Something good happened today. We assume that bad news must always cancel out good news, but that's going to burn us out. We have to celebrate every victory as it comes so that we feel like we're achieving something. There will always be further to go. If we just keep moving the finish line, we're going to feel like we're losing all the time. We have to move that line to where we are, keep celebrating, and then keep moving. We can also choose joy by developing high quality hobbies. This is just beyond triple screening. I used to think that rest was synonymous with stillness and isolation. I was only truly resting if I was alone on my couch, watching a TV show I wasn't watching, with my computer open to an email I wasn't responding to, with my phone open to a social media feed I wasn't really processing. Does that actually feel good? Or do you still feel exhausted? Because what I found is that I would do that for hours and ultimately feel just as terrible, just as numb as I did when I started. And I would say, well, I guess I need more rest. And I would keep doing that. Eventually, I realized that for me, my rest is mostly active, mostly taking walks around my neighborhood and playing with my dog, hanging out with my wife, making homemade pasta, playing board games with new friends, taking naps in the sun, listening to audiobooks that help me become the kind of man that I want to be. High quality hobbies should make us feel genuinely rested. And then remembering at the end of the day that no one else can choose joy for us. We must choose joy for ourselves and for each other. We cannot do it alone. We cannot do it just once. We have to keep showing up every day, wake up and say, how can I choose joy today? So I want to thank you all so much for spending some time here with me. I will open the floor for a couple of minutes to any questions that you have. I'll share a couple of suggestions for further reading as well. Marcia, about Marsha P. Johnson, an incredibly joyful book, Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Marie Brown, and Our Work is Everywhere, which is right here, which is a beautiful illustrated oral history of the ways that our community uses joy to build something beautiful. And now I'll put my contact information up here while we go into the Q&A. I'll say again, thank you all so much. This is lovely. And I'll toss it over to Ro because you've got your hand raised already, so I don't have to vamp anymore. Ro, hit me. What do you have?
Hi, Ben. Shabbat shalom. Um, Listen, I don't have a question, but I'd like to add a little bit here.
Yeah,
I got
please.
I got a PhD in here.
Amazing.
Thank you. It's an ontology. So I'd like to really quickly to forward what it is you're delivering is distinguished language in a way where I think what you said will make a bigger difference, have a bigger impact. So there's a huge difference. What Ben is sharing about choosing is very different from deciding.
Hmm.
Okay, so decide comes from the Latin root decidere, which is to kill off, right? It's suicide, homicide, spermicide, genocide, decide. So what decide is you go into the past and you weigh out all that shit from your past and you pick something from that, which is the version of what you've already had. So it's not really choosing anything new. Choice is after consideration.
Hmm.
So you've looked at all that stuff from your past and you go and you say to yourself, because listen, your emotions are basic instincts. That's it. It's like when you step on a tack and you yell ow, the ow is in 500 languages. Okay.
Yeah.
So to choose is to create something new, which is an entire context, because context is decisive. So if the context of something is, I'm walking into this party tonight and I'm going to have a good time, no
Yeah.
matter what. And then I have my word to myself about that has to matter. But choosing
Yeah.
is extremely powerful, distinguished from deciding, because deciding will give you a version of what you've already had. And choice is a brand new creation. Ben, when you're talking about artists, you're talking
Yeah.
about the ontological subjective reality, which is a future based declaration of how things are going to go versus some version of what you've already had. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for the
Yeah.
opportunity to
Thank you
share
for
that,
adding
Ben.
that. I really appreciate that. And I think you're spot on. We create our own reality. Reality
Yeah.
is not objective. If you decide everyone hates you, if you decide everyone at the next event you go to is going to do a transphobic microaggression, you'll
Yeah.
find it. You will
Yeah.
find whatever you choose to look for. If
Your
you
brain will
choose to look
always find what it's looking for.
exactly.
It will. It is designed to, it's a, try to get that your that voice in your head, that one that says I suck or I'm great, it's a defense mechanism. It's a survival mechanism. Okay, it has no interest in what you want or what you don't want. It's simply here to survive, and we don't have saber-toothed tigers to survive anymore. Now we're
Yeah.
literally surviving semantics. We're surviving conversational domains like, oh, that's this, that place sucks, and we're stuck in semantics. And listen, a party can't suck. Okay, vacuum cleaners suck. So it's an agreement reality that things can suck and this can be this and this can be bad. Listen, Albert Einstein would say, when I go outside and I find a parking place that doesn't have any gravity, now there's something wrong. Until then, everything's working exactly the way it's supposed to. But I'm vomiting my opinion on how I think reality should go. Trust me on this. Gravity doesn't care what you think. You walk up to the top of that building and you take a step in total disbelief that you're going to fall. Science doesn't care. So be really mindful. What Ben is sharing with you tonight is gold. Like
Thank
I
you.
didn't get choice the way that he's sharing it tonight till I was at $150,000 into an education. Oh my God, if I could sell it back.
We'll work on getting you that refund, Ro.
No, no,
No,
I
you're
listen,
brilliant. I'm
I
glad you
did
have
really
that.
good,
And
but thank
thank you
you.
for sharing that. And Leighton, I want to make sure that you have a chance to share your question or your thought
Yeah.
as well. But thank you, Ro. I really appreciate that. Leighton, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, no, I'm really grateful that you shared this whole presentation, and it's really coming at a timely moment for me because I was just venting with some of my close friends that I'm like the keeper of whimsy in my group. Like I feel
Mm.
like everyone is just doom scrolling, as you said. But what I really want to ask is, uh, for some people, I feel like they've internalized this idea of it is what it is. And no matter what I do, I can say, yes, we can just color with Crayola crayons. We can just take a paper takeout bag and tear it up. You know, crayons work really well on brown paper. It's amazing. Um, and I'm just saying you don't need a lot to do something that feels meaningful and joyful. And the answer is always, I don't have time. I don't have. That's what it is. It doesn't. Is there anything that you could offer to help kind of not break through, but just meet them where they're at?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And as a fellow keeper of whimsy, I see you. That is a critical role to play.
Thank
I'm
you.
glad that you're asking that, and keep doing that. Keep finding that for yourself. What I'd say is, we want to understand that when we're talking to the people that we love who are trapped in doom, on some level, doom and defeatism is addictive because it is
Mm,
tremendously comforting. It's amazing for someone to tell you it doesn't matter what you do because it is what it is. The world's on fire, we're cooked, whatever, however you want to say it. It's so comforting to say that we can just give up. And so a lot of people really love their doom because it gives them the ability to say, I'm too tired to do anything else. I'm exhausted. I'm burnt out. I'm afraid. And my doom tells me it doesn't matter what I do, anyways. It's time to give up. And so recognizing why people are clinging to that and not necessarily taking everything they say at face value, I think will be
mm,
important. Even if they're not ready to see that, it's helpful for us to know the systems that are keeping them like this. That addiction to doom is really big, and recognizing that our phones and technology and social media are very intentionally extracting that energy from people so that they do not have the energy to go out in public and put their phones down and make a new friend, to go out and get involved in a social movement, an issue they care about. So I think that's the first part, is being aware of like what are the undercurrents that are pulling somebody under the water. Even if they're not ready to look at it, we can know about it and we can work with that. So maybe I'll say, "Hey, I want to have a phone-free Crayola coloring party." And I'm going to give them
mm,
gentle nudges to maybe start to notice, wow, when we put our phones away for an hour, how does that feel? Or maybe I invite them to get involved in advocacy that's kind of an on-ramp that feels really exciting. I'm not going to say, "Oh, I want you to get involved in advocacy. Let's go to a protest. Let's go to the Missouri State
mhm,
Capitol. Let's call Josh Hawley." Josh Hawley was my representative. That's not a good first way to engage because it feels like shit. If I want somebody new to get engaged, we're going to do a letter writing project through Trans Santa or through the Pinta Pride Project. I'm going to find things to do that I can see the immediate impact of and that I know make a difference. And then I get that dopamine
I
hit
see.
because we're all in that dopamine hole. So I would give them little opportunities to try doing something good. I would send them good news wherever you find it because the more in social media we are, the more bad news we're seeing. So I send all my most chronically online friends every good story I can find, and it does amazing things to my brain to sit and look for the good news actively every week. And I'll gently encourage them. Could we try some no screens time? Or I really want to start going for walks. Does anybody want to do that with me? We can Jedi mind trick
Right.
them a little bit. It's okay. So hopefully those are some starting places to help. And if you ever want to reach out, if any of you want to, and brainstorm some other ways to help bring joy to the people around you, I know it's hard when people are really into that doom. Also, people are talking about Jane foolery in the chat as an inclusive version of tomfoolery, and I love that.
That's incredible. No, that
Yeah,
was very helpful. Thank you. You're inspiring me to
absolutely.
make like a Joinuary or something. I don't know, but like I'm gonna
Ooh,
try this.
I love that. Please let me know how it goes.
Absolutely. Thank you so
I
much.
think tomorrow I'm
Yeah.
going to cut back on
All
my
right.
anger.
Well, I think that is just about all that we have time for this evening. So I will close by just saying thank you all so much for choosing to be together tonight. It's a hard time right now. I know that it's scary. I know that it hurts. Together is the best thing that we can be.
Yeah, I
So
think
thank you
tomorrow
all
I'm going to
for
cut
choosing
back
to be
very
here.
much on my
Alana, are you intending to come off mute? Do you have a question?
no, I was just going to say thank you
Oh,
for
yeah.
your comments and everything. I think tomorrow I am going to definitely be cutting back on my anger and rage posting because uh, I'm in all of the different groups and you just get yourself spun up and then you can't find a way to spin yourself down. So I think
Yeah.
I will stay at the 10,000 foot level tomorrow and see how that works.
I love that. That's amazing. And even if it's just times of day, right? For me, I don't have social media on my phone. I check it on my computer at 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. There's no sun, there's no news. I check the news and social media on my terms. And that taking that power back for me, that intentionality, I'll set a timer for how long I'm going to spend looking. Makes it feel like I'm a little more in control. And that's the best we can do is just
Binge
intentionality.
watch a movie.
Yeah. I love that. There are lots of other, we can read a book, we can go for a walk, play a
There you
board
go.
game. Yeah, we gain back a lot of time when we start to put our phones away. Well, thank you all so much. This has been absolutely lovely. I'll send you all off to your evenings. Have a wonderful rest of the conference. And reach out if you ever want to talk about joy. So thank you all so much and have a
Thank you.
lovely rest of your night. Be safe, everybody. Bye.